So I've got my three panelists here. I was so tempted to get ChatGPT to write the introductions for me, but I resisted it, and I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start off with Chris, quick introduction about yourself, your work and your clients, and we'll go from there.
Fantastic, thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. My name's Chris. I'm the Managing Director of CHS. We are a digital-first, fully integrated agency based just down on the South Coast. Very excited to be here today because AI is just becoming a much bigger part of what we do. It's literally making everything we do quicker and maybe a little bit more fun as well. So thank you again, John, for having us here today.
And I'd like to also thank CHS who are recording today. So we'll be getting some clips of the sessions today, so I'd like to thank them for that. Rupa?
Hiya, hello, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm the founder of a copywriting and communications consultancy, recently self-employed, so I've had a 20-year career working in corporates, financial services and professional services, so this is all still very new to me. And yeah, looking forward to talking about ChatGPT with you guys a bit later as well.
And finally, Russell?
Hi everyone, I'm Russell. I work at Insurance and AllClear, which is travel insurance companies. I'm a copywriter there, generating sort of customer-facing content across all sorts of stuff, DMs, blogs, emails, web, all that sort of stuff. Fairly new to the industry, so again, this is all quite new to me, but excited to be here and seeing how we all feel about AI and chatbot.
So, first question, I'll start with you, Chris, is what were your first impressions when you started to kind of use this technology? Like your first kind of feelings, and then where you think this can go? Yeah.
Thank you, John. Well, from our side, we're always trying to keep an eye in terms of what might be coming down the road and seeing where we might be able to go with new technologies. And there's been applications for AI in the world of marketing for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden ChatGPT came along, and DALL-E came along beforehand, and it's like it just put a steroid shot in absolutely everything. I think the first impression is, you know that what you're doing is you're using a system that can't think, that can't be creative. But actually the more you use it, the more it feels like it's someone who is thinking and someone who is being creative. So when you start to think about where it can really help and where it can go, we look at the smaller parts, if you like, the less creative, the less bits that really need proper brain power, proper creativity, that spark. And you say, well, actually, hopefully tools will be able to do much more of this for us in future.
And Rupa, this was around about the time that you just quit the kind of the security sometimes of kind of the main job and started to go from freelance. So what were your impressions when you started to see this and you're thinking, how is this going to impact yourself?
Yeah, so it was 2 days after I quit my job. The announcement so the announcement of ChatGPT was on the 30th of November. It's going to be in my memory forever. And I instantly regretted my decision and thought, can I backtrack and actually go back to my job? But actually, taking a step back, obviously the media hype was intense. Robots are coming, they're taking over our jobs. People like me who are a copywriter, you're not going to have a job in like 6 months to 12 months. So, there was all that kind of in the background. But I took the opportunity to actually test the technology and actually see what it was capable of doing. And actually, it's really smart. That was my first impression. It was quite efficient. You put a prompt in and it spits out copy, and essentially it does what you ask it to do. On further reflection, when you read that copy, it doesn't necessarily make sense. It's not always accurate, as you know. And actually, does it replace what somebody like myself, a skilled writer can do? Can it replace that human expression and voice and tone? I don't think so. So kind of mixed emotions, I would say.
And Russell, same question to yourself?
Yeah, first impressions, honestly, not particularly impressive. Got it to generate something on a very basic prompt, and it was very repetitive. Both in terms of, because we tried it on a blog about romantic trips to take to Paris, things to do. I think of about 300 words, around 40 of them were the word romantic. So it needed a lot of tweaking, but the more we sort of practiced with it and played with it and and worked on prompting the AI, I want it this style, I want you to mention these things, the more you put into it, the more you can get out of it. So my impression initially wasn't particularly great, but as we've worked more and more with it, we found what it's good at and how to get it to do those things even better. So.
And so can you delve into a specific use case? I think at Insure and Go you've got some pages that have gone through a copy process. Can you explain what that process has been using the technology to get something that's now live on one of the websites?
Yeah, essentially what we'll do is we'll prep the bot with, we want to write a content about this destination or this activity, and we'll want it to ask specific questions. We'll go through, people also ask, so we can get a bunch of questions related to that content, get it to ask those, answer them, do it in a format that is relatively user-friendly, etc. Then we'll go through it as if we would any other piece of content. We'll review it, we'll analyse it. Right, is it actually answering the questions we're putting in the headlines? Can it be formatted better? We'll do a second draft where we'll sort of take out the bits that don't work, expand on those that do, and rewrite some bits. And then it'll go through again, another read through just to make sure it's all good. And then it will go onto the site. So we're using it to build frameworks rather than the actual content itself, which is where it's a lot better at.
And how many pages so far has that gone through that process?
It's been around 20 pages we've used it on so far as a definite base, because we are still using human-based content so that we can compare and contrast, right, is this page performing better than that page? But it's a similar sort of content, but it's based on the AI context. So.
And any results of that? We're still at early kind of stages.
Still at early stages, but generally speaking, it's not. If there are any differences, they're not huge. For example, we've been using it to generate titles and subject lines for emails, and the open rate difference is only 0.1% lower for the ChatGPT generated subject lines than it is the human ones. So it's not a lot in it, and that could be down to the specific content rather than the fact that it was built on an AI skeleton, essentially.
Okay. And Rupa, some examples of where you've been using it, have the clients been asking you to use it, etc.?
Yeah, so I wouldn't use it necessarily to kind of write like a long piece of prose, for example. It's very much something I would use maybe as a starting point, so for idea generation, maybe as a brainstorming tool, which we had earlier this morning. Is quite good at that. Also from a kind of research perspective, if I'm perhaps looking at a website and I just need a really quick summary to kind of just understand what the website's about, or like focus on a particular topic, it's quite good to kind of help summarize topics, and be able to kind of generate information quite quickly. I would say it's more kind of used as an extension of my services. It kind of enhances the services that I provide. I wouldn't necessarily say that I use it kind of to necessarily write large pieces of content. Yeah.
And Chris, for yourself, obviously it's not just about ChatGPT creating text. In your business, you're having to create videos, you're having to create photos and graphics. There's lots of different tools that you've been using. So some practical examples of actual campaigns when you've been using it?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because listening, Russell, to yourself, listening Rupa to yourself as well. I think you've hit the nail on the head where if you're expecting AI to get you from 0 to 100%, you probably don't have the right expectation. If you're expecting to be able to get to partway through a brief, maybe 80% of the way there, and then add the spark that humans do, that we all have, in terms of what it is we're looking to do, then actually what you can find is that first 80% of the journey, you can get there much more quickly. So if we start off in the really uninventive stuff, right? I write loads of Excel formulas. I don't anymore because ChatGPT does it for me. It does it more quickly. I don't have to worry about counting my brackets and all that jazz, right? It makes it easy. Then when it comes to longer form emails where you're thinking, is this right? Is this the best way of doing it? Is this the best way of talking around that topic? No problem. I've got a copy editor where instead of getting ChatGPT to write content for me and me taking it further, I can write the content, tell ChatGPT that it's my editor, and get real copy suggestions back. It will tell me when I'm, as I often do, waffling.
I won't.
And then what becomes really interesting is where we're starting to see applications in, John, as you mentioned, these more creative briefs. Mm-hmm. So think of creative strategy, planning slides. Tell it to act as a planning director for a creative agency. I will paste you slides of research which you will accept as true. Then I'll give you tasks to do. At the end of that, I'd like you to come up with a brand proposition for this brand. And it never gets it right, but I'll tell you what, it gets to some interesting places to start thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Then in terms of imagery, the use of other platforms like Midjourney, the opportunity to prompt it to imagine situations. Again, never gets it right, but gives our creative team the opportunity to create stimulus in a much more effective way.
I think I've got the slide here. So there's an example you sent yesterday, which is a kind of a what could look like a British Airways and Blueberry to get at Burberry. tell you that I don't wear that stuff. So can you just go through the examples of what this use case is here?
And I hasten to add, this isn't work that we've done. This is like, probably everyone's seen examples of this kind of thing on LinkedIn. But I just think this is a really good example. Somebody created a Midjourney prompt which asked Midjourney to imagine what a brand collaboration between Burberry and British Airways might look like. And you can see here, all of the copy's wrong. That person doesn't look real. The textures are slightly off. It's all slightly not right. But I'll tell you what, to give that as a brief to a creative team to then start bringing it to life, it's good inspiration.
So last week, many of us were at Brighton SEO, and there was quite a lot of presentations that mentioned this, and one of the presentations there was about the temptations of using this. And obviously with marketing budgets being pushed due to various factors, from the copy side of things, there's maybe a big temptation to say, hey, we're producing 20, 30 articles a month, this amount of fee with outsourced to a freelancer. Can we then just save the money, give it to an exec? So what are those kind of the temptations, and what would the downsides be for the clients, Russell, I think?
I mean, the general downside is going to be that it's not ready for that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And as Harry mentioned in his talk, Google is definitely rewarding high quality content over low quality content. So it's much better to get 5 or 6 or 8 quality posts or blogs out there than it is to spam it with 20 to 30. It's not going to get you where you want to be. And at this point in time, the AI is just not at a point where it can deliver that content on its own. As Chris said, what it is it's fantastic for an inspiration start point or providing a skeleton for the article or the piece, but it's not for a while, I don't think, is it going to be ready to generate everything from 0 to 100%.
And Rupa, have you had those conversations? Has there been some misconceptions of the technology from higher above, and then you've had to kind of explain that, or has it not really come up in the clients you've been working on so far?
Yes, it's starting to definitely come up, I would say. I think there's a big education piece there, actually, some kind of awareness of what the technology is and kind of, what it can be used for. But I'm in agreement with Russell. I don't see it. The technology is not ready yet. I think if a client, particularly is, desperate to use the technology for kind of, 30% of its blog content, I would say you're going to see the results of that, and it's going to, it's not going to be good. The human element of copy and actually the human expression, that will all be missing. The nuances, the way that we talk naturally, the human connection, that whole element will sadly be missed. It's very repetitive, the content that's churned out. It's boring. It lacks it's just not very interesting. And for me, I think when I read something, I do want to feel, particularly if it comes from a company, I want to feel some kind of affinity with that brand. And I think where we are going now with, so many brands, so many businesses vying for our attention, if you do not get that human connection, if you do not, connect with your customers, you're going to miss out on that business. Unfortunately, people won't want to buy from you. So I think, sadly, I don't think you can put all your eggs in one basket at the moment with AI.
And some of your clients obviously work in regulated industries in terms of finance. What's the conversations been there with compliance in terms of, have they asked about whether this content has come 100% from a tool, etc., or is it the fact that compliance teams are going to have to catch up with this, or is it all okay because it's going through these editing processes?
I'd say compliance are probably on the back foot with this, and I think this is sometimes the case of technologies out there, and then we kind of see compliance slowly catching up. But I think the conversations are now being had. But yeah, it's definitely the marketing and the kind of the content teams that are driving those conversations rather than kind of the other way around.
And Russell, for the same, any conversations over at AllClear Insure and Go around this?
There's been some stuff on the back burner, yeah. It's, as you say, it's sort of us that's in the content team that are sort of like, right, this is a good thing to use, we should be using it. And everything we do, especially if it's generated by AI, runs through compliance anyway. So we make a point of running it past them. But there are conversations about how to move forward with it in the future. Because at the moment I think the legislation, no one's quite sure exactly what the compliance standards are and if they differ if it's generated by AI.
Yeah.
And obviously once that's decided, it will be easier for the compliance teams to then go, right, this is our goals, this is what we need to be checking. But until that conversation's had, there's only so much they can do, but go through and make sure it's all factual and correct, and we're not giving anyone misinformation.
And Chris, when it comes to images or music, we saw the examples before, or videos, is it a grey area? So is it, if you were to use this technology to produce something to the client, who owns that? What's the discussions been around that side of things?
Do you know what, that's such an interesting space, and to consider it, you really need to go back to how these generative platforms work, which is they learn through a data set and they generate what they're expecting to generate. Now, because of the way that all AI platforms work, you can see the stimulus that goes in, you can see the output that comes out, but you can't really measure the decision-making process in the middle. And perhaps, Rupa, going back to what you were saying before about where some of that passion is perhaps lacking, part of that's because everything that ChatGPT will ever write has kind of been written before. It knows that the next most likely word is going to be one of these words, or it might be followed by this, or it might be followed by X, Y, or Z. The same's true of imagery. And so, if we use a generative AI to generate a picture of a face, it could, John, look identical to you.
Yeah,
Maybe, who knows? Depends on the prompt.
yeah.
Right? And the challenge there is that then who owns that image? Because from the AI generation we do for generating it, it's the output of the prompt that we have given the platform. However, actually in true life, and we won't see this until at some point it's tested by court, do you have a right to that image if it looks very, very, very similar to you?
So we've seen some examples recently of it was the Pope, where he's like in his E17 giant jacket.
I hear he's a fan.
Yeah. And so obviously there's those kind of questions about, is it fake media, is it fake or not, etc. And the quality of the images are, as we've seen currently from the photography competition, are lifelike, and you just get that by adding a prompt of photorealistic. When it comes to video, that still seems to be a little bit further down the line. There are some examples that we saw before, but that's not true kind of. They're using pre-made computer-generated graphics to create that example of the video, but there's some examples of where you can now feed it a prompt, it'll try and create a video. Is that still quite far away? So the examples I've seen, the bit rates, the frames per second are still quite poor quality, and they can do like animated and like stylized, but not kind of to the level of realistic.
I think it's probably closer than we all would think it's going to be. So if we have a look at, for example, the work that's been done in Hollywood around de-aging actors now, whereas that used to be done through a lot of quite manual CGI, now it's all done with AI. That exists in the movie industry today. How long until we get access to that as marketing professionals? It's not going to be a huge amount of time. You're absolutely right. In today's world, there is no easy way to create a video from scratch. However, for example, What you can do in some of the more up-to-date video editing suites is ask the suite to create a first pass edit for you off the back of some footage, and it will make decisions based on the prompt that you give it. Equally, Adobe released an update just the other day around their video to text framework, which now allows you to effectively transcribe on the fly video, identify pause, hit backspace, remove that pause, and it does that work for you. So yes, we're way away from being able to say, give me a video of John running a panel about AI, which would be beautifully meta in itself. But we're not that far away from it having real life uses.
And so you mentioned there some examples of these tools being used within existing platforms like the Adobe kind of suite. So is that going to impact the skills that you're training for, or when you're getting execs or new people coming into the business? Are you now going to be thinking about, well, actually, I'm not going to need to tell them and teach them and train them on these things, so I know AI is going to be doing that element of the job, but I'm going to be teaching them how to be great prompters? Is that something that you're thinking about when you're looking at your workforce going forward?
Not yet. So I think the ability to write a really good prompt is going to be inherent in pretty much every professional career that we see moving forward, without a doubt. However, the key point that you noted there, John, is that you really need to know what it is you're expecting out of a platform. You need to be able to create that yourself in order to know whether what you are getting given by that platform, whether that is good. I think back to Rupa, your point around the copy. How on earth can you know if copy isn't quite hitting the mark, if it doesn't have that human connection, if you can't write with that human connection yourself? So while we want to make sure people are able to write really good prompts, which I think lots of people are now more than ever, you still need to be able to do the job yourself to know what you're expecting.
And so Rupert, are you now seeing yourself trying to become better at prompting, or you can see that being a skill that you will add to your kind of repertoire, as well as what Chris mentioned, the ability to evaluate and edit that stuff? Is that something you think is going to be important for people going forward, to be able to use these tools and learn how to prompt them correctly?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a skill I'm learning, and I think in the future, obviously, I think for people getting into the industry, I think it will definitely be a skill that you'll need. But it's all trial and error at the moment. I think, I've spent, I hate to think how much time I've actually spent putting into ChatGPT, prompts, how to make copy more conversational. I saw a tip the other day that if you ask the AI to write copy suitable for like a 10-year-old, apparently that's the kind of right age to aim for. It will actually come out quite chatty and kind of quite conversational. Is it going to be great? I don't think so, not yet anyway. But I think, other skills, creative thinking and problem solving, I think all those critical thinking, they're skills that we will still require and actually are going to be even more important in the future. We can't rely on AI solely. I think we have to have that human element of it, as we've spoken about, but also, our clients want to buy from us for a reason. They want that critical thinking from us rather than, I think, from the technology. It can enhance what we provide, but I don't think it's the kind of sole thing.
And Chris, Russell, sorry, in an example in an in-house team, how's it kind of been? Have people been saying, "Oh, this is the person that's responsible for this AI and to use it," or is it kind of a tool that's being used by lots of different people across lots of different departments?
We're not sort of focusing on, right, you learn AI, and then we'll all learn from you. It's more a case of, as we're generating content or we're doing emails, etc., we'll try it, we'll see, and we'll run tests, we'll compare open rates, etc. So it's not just sort of, this is a niche bit of information, you learn that. It's something that sort of most of us in the communications team are now using, and then once we have got a sort of a firm grip on it and the best practices, we'll then share it with the wider team so that it can be used for sort of all sorts of stuff within the company. But it is definitely a skill that you're going to need going forward. And as you said, the human element is definitely vital, because sometimes it will generate copy and you'll go, right, it's no problem with that information being in paragraph 3, it's fine. But it flows a lot better in paragraph 2, which, as you said, Chris, is really handy to have, because the AI won't grasp that. It won't understand it and go, no, the information's correct, it's all fine in the brief. But you as a person will know it flows better there, it works better there. So it's going to be an extra skill to learn, and I think we're all going to be using it within a couple of years.
And in a couple of years or in a year's time, where do you think, or have you identified some areas in the business where you say, well, if it improves 10% and it gets to this level, that job's gone or that process has gone? Is there any things that you can see that happening in the future that you think is definitely a really good use case?
There's a few processes that I think it will definitely streamline. Whether it will be to the point of the job's gone, I very much doubt. But for example, sort of social media posts, I think it will be good for that because it's shorter. There's much less chance for it to just repeat itself if it's got a shorter character limit, if we can get it to accept a character limit. But yeah, so social posts I think will be streamlined quite a bit, as well as sort of internal communications. I think that could be quite handy for that. We need this information related to these people, generate for that, and you're not as worried about it sort of flowing, etc. for the customer. It's more, this is the information we need to tell people. So for that, I think it could be quite useful.
And Chris, same kind of question to you. Obviously, you identified your Excel examples and different examples. What's the kind of the killer use case in a year's time you'd love it to be able to start to be able to do for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting, John, because back to the question almost that links to that, which is, will it remove jobs?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it necessarily will remove any single jobs, but what it will do is it will make every role within a creative business much quicker by removing the elements which are less creative. So in terms of what that ideal use case, that, if you like, perfect that perfect silver bullet in our day-to-day work, do you know, I would love it sitting on my shoulder when I'm writing an email in Outlook every time, just to say, by the way, Chris, that bit doesn't really make sense. Or these bits really don't make sense. You should consider using more punctuation, like a powered up Clippy from Microsoft Office, really.
So we've seen some examples of, they've called Copilot, which is, and obviously as Microsoft have invested in OpenAI, they've kind of got access, and there's a reason probably they'll want to use it. So those use cases, as you know, you're writing an email, it goes through everybody's calendars, finds the latest meeting notes, and all those use cases. It's just, everybody will be able to use it, and it'll become second nature, I guess.
Absolutely, and it will remove the parts of everyone's role where actually there is more kind of BAU process automation.
Mm-hmm.
When we look across the wider industry, the jobs which people are talking about being at risk are those where they require a lot of information, but effectively it's decision making. So there's lots of talk of GPs being able to use AI to better diagnose people, for example, or lawyers being able to use AI to generate very, very rapid contracts. Because once you know and understand some aspects of basic contract law, which the AI does, it's able to generate it very quickly. The key, or the interesting point around, you know, the industries that we're in, is they're all creative. So it won't necessarily be able to be that magic bullet, as you know, to that killer feature to replace one role, but it might be able to just take all of the other bits away.
And what about anything that you think it might be able to do but you wouldn't want it to do? So they're like things that you love to be able to do. So whether that's, you know, playing around with scripts, or, you know, drawing, you know, little scamps or something like that. Is there something that you're like, I don't want it to take away this element of my job because it's something that I get great joy from and enthusiasm from?
I think the biggest danger in that respect of taking away just from society and from roles and from all of our lives individually, is taking away that need for people to learn in their roles, or the expectation that they need to learn how to write good copy. You know, it'd be such a devastating situation if people went into the world of creative marketing thinking, I can just write copy using an AI chatbot. It's just not the case. And you see it a little bit in terms of technology today, don't you, where technology is implanted in all of our lives. Like Gen X use iPhones and iPads from such a young age that they don't understand how some technology works. You know, they don't understand email etiquette sometimes and how to communicate in different ways. So I think the biggest danger is actually that we lose the need to learn everything else around it.
So Rupert, do you think that could be something that would happen in the future? We've got the younger generation is coming through that. I mean, I gave a talk at school recently, and the year sixes, and they're all laughing and chatting away because they have been using this technology to write their homework, and the teacher she knew it, but she obviously couldn't do anything about it. Do you think that's a problem that we might see in the future, that we'll get a workforce that comes through that doesn't have some of those skills?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, the emphasis really has to be on education, and actually it's okay to use the technology, but actually, you know, asking the question, well, from a, you know, asking students to maybe use ChatGPT to write an essay, for example, but then getting the students to actually critique the essay and actually, you know, what's right with it, what's wrong with it, you know, actually looking at it from that perspective rather than saying, no, you know, all out to kind of using it. I think that, you know, future generations will, you know, the world's going to be very different, and I think we have to adapt to the technology that we have, but I think we have to use it properly, and I think, you know, the government needs to play a part in that as well. You know, from an ethics perspective, you know, there needs to be some standards set, and I don't think we've got that quite right at the moment. You know, the recruitment industry, for example, that's being transformed massively now because people can, you know, use the technology to write a cover letter. Well, cover letters are dead now, right? So recruitment has to come up with different ways to, you know, encourage people to apply and hire for jobs. It's not just a case of actually writing a letter. It's actually, how can you demonstrate that you've got, you know, the skills that this company requires? So I think, yes, it will make, you know, a massive difference. I also agree with your point, Chris, around, you know, learning from each other. I think particularly this period where we've been, you know, coming out of COVID, people are returning to the office. Younger generations need to learn and see from people that they work with how to pick up the phone and actually have a conversation with the client, because that's not something that you instinctively know how to do, or write an email, as you said. You know, when I started back in the day now, we used to like fax press releases. We don't do that anymore. Like, what is a fax? If I was to explain that to my 6-year-old son, he'd be like, Mummy, I don't really understand what that means. You just send an email, surely. So I think, you know, having leaders that are able to actually physically be there, present, and actually able to explain how the technology works and actually how it enhances, you know, the things that we already do. I also agree with you, Chris, in terms of joy is really important. I think for me, I started my business because I get joy out of writing, and I think the technology, there's a risk with the technology that actually it will suck the joy out of being creative, and that's a big fear for me. You know, I read books because I actually enjoy reading. I listen to music because I want to hear like my favourite artists singing songs. So is that going to change in the future? Are we going to be listening to kind of AI produced music? And what does that actually mean for us as humans? You know, I feel like there's lots of unanswered questions that need to be answered and kind of really thought about.
Okay, we'll start to take some questions in a minute, but one last question to you, Russell. So the same questions, like what use cases are you don't want it to take over? Is it similar to what Rupa said?
Very similar to Rupa. I got into this because I love writing. Doesn't necessarily matter what I'm writing about. I enjoy writing, I enjoy going out, and I enjoy making content that people then enjoy reading. Again, the ChatGPT is a great tool to help with that, because everyone hates a blank page. Who doesn't? And ChatGPT can really eliminate blank page, because you, as long as you know what you're writing about, you can use it to get that framework, and then you can get onto the fun part of writing, which is the actual writing. So I would not like it to take that away, but as I say, I'm not expecting it to replace that. But as Chris said, it's going to be great for those mundane tasks which aren't creative but do still take up some of my day. And the more of my day I can spend writing, the less it feels like working. So
okay, so we'll open up to some questions. Do we have any questions to start off with? Yes?
So from a client side, first of all, it's been fascinating hearing how AI is going to influence loads of different parts, but not just the roast guys, but also the new guys just now. From a client side, it sounds like loads of tasks, especially mundane ones, will be made a lot quicker. And actually, certainly from a copy and writing point of view, a creative point of view, you can get a whole bunch of steps further forward. I guess from a client side, the question I'm going to ask is like, well, surely this makes working with you guys a lot cheaper. can't I half the hourly rate, half. But genuinely, I feel like I should pay a lot less for agencies now because they're spending less time with it.
Chris, agency owner?
Do you know, I think that's such a fantastic question, and I think, you know, every agency has a different way of charging, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure that there will be some challenges with what you've just suggested, but for us, it's true. You know, we're using AI to get us to a position more quickly, and that just means that we charge our clients less, or it means that we're able to do more within the allotted time, or it means that we're able to, and this is the really exciting bit, and I think this is where I think there will be a huge change. It means that we are able to get to a space where we would do on a really big budget for a really big client, actually on a smaller budget for a more mid-sized client or for a smaller client. It should open up and democratise, if you like, working with top-flight agencies for smaller businesses, which is no bad thing.
Rupa, any views on the question there?
Yeah, so I think, I agree with what Chris is saying. I think it's all about value, and actually, particularly for somebody who's self-employed, you know, it's showing our clients what value we can bring, which is enhanced by the technology that's out there. I wouldn't immediately race to put my rates down. I think it's, again, you know, it's about awareness and educating our clients, you know, to understand how the technology can be used. But this isn't, you know, an overnight thing. You know, it's not just we switch a light on and suddenly, you know, we're using AI and kind of, you know, we're offering really cheaper services. I think it's more of a iterative process rather than kind of dropping prices straight off.
Mm-hmm. Russell, obviously the competition in the search results is really, really high. So do you see that working with an agency that's using this is it going to be an advantage to you versus if you know 3 or 4 of your competitors are, or then you may know that 3 of your competitors have just ditched their agencies and they've just got an exec bashing out this content, but as we heard before, it might be short-term gains, but at some point they'll get penalised.
I think it's always going to be worth sticking with a company that knows AI, because once you use AI, you also start to understand how it works, so you can optimize essentially. Even if someone is using AI, you're going to know where they're going to fall short, and you can capitalize on that. So I would say it's definitely still worth sticking with the customers, the agency that's using the AI rather than the one that's not, essentially, even if that does cost a bit more.
Can I add just a very quick 10-second addition to that as well, which I think might be interesting? We have a client who is not in the clothing space, a completely different space. You'd never suspect that this request would come from them. They got in touch a little while ago and said, we're having a think about what we might be able to do with maybe charity, maybe just something completely different. Could you ever think about whether we could create brand X clothing? And traditionally, a brief like that, if we'd quoted it up originally, it would have been a couple of days of creative thinking. You would have gotten to a space where it had a cost associated with it, which probably the client didn't have, bearing in mind it was a very first stage thought. But what we were able to do is very much just as a value add, brief the team, a chap in the team called Max, who writes a lot of prompts, saying, look, let's explore this using Midjourney, how could it look? And we were able to very rapidly generate that work. So I think it's probably a really good question, because it might also open up the opportunity to explore briefs that otherwise you just wouldn't, that would have been cost prohibitive.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
So I work for a charity, and we're looking at it in terms of efficiencies, because like most charities have our greatest kind of battle is resources, and the other battle we have is that we can't compete to cut through in digital content, reaching the audiences we need it to. And I'm just wondering how much more content you think this will generate that we have to then cut through, if that makes sense. Do you think we're going to see kind of large organisations just generating more and more and more content for consumers to consume?
Yes. Very short answer. The slightly longer answer is we're already seeing loads of content for people to cut through because it's being outsourced to content farms if people are that way inclined. And they're generating content based on similar principles and similar ideas. What this is going to do is it's going to turn the dial for people to consume. And then what we're going to see is Google's going to get really, really good at making sure that only high quality content comes through, which makes everything that Russell and Rupa have said just way more important. So I would say beat everyone at their own game, use ChatGPT to get you some of the way there, and then focus on what you were saying, Rupa, about finding that really human part of the copy to make sure that you do cut through, because that's what will let you at the end of the day.
So I guess, is it more tempting to know that now you've got this technology that you could take a task that might have been really, really difficult in the past, to say, for example, what's the weather like in country X multiplied by so many different times of countries and months of the year, that could have taken years to write, and there's a temptation to do that, whether that creates good copy or not, but is that a temptation that you can see happening?
I can see some people, using the AI to generate the entire article and go, right, that's it, job done, sorted, I can get on with my day, I can move on to other tasks, but it is only going to be short-term gains, as we know from Google. It's going to look at that content and go, it's not that high quality, let's bump it down the SERP, let's not feature it as highly, whereas someone's then taken, again, great, use ChatGPT to generate that information, gather it all in one place, then build on that. Take that, check it, because as we know, sometimes it sounds right but isn't right, verify, and then build a much higher quality article that's going to keep ranking higher consistently, and just take it from there, rather than spur out lots and lots of content that's not as good.
And in the charity sector, Sam, have you seen brands using this type of technology in their campaigns as a kind of a point or not?
I think there's been a real shift in our sector on sort of storytelling and authenticity. So I think from a sort of content creative perspective, it's not really being looked at. I think it might be from a sort of idea perspective and generating ideas. I think what the sector is looking at much more is sort of processes and automation to free up the time of staff to then be able to sort of move that capacity elsewhere within the organisations.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for the panel at this moment in time? No? Okay, so I've got some more questions to go through. So we touched upon the example there of Vertex AI, which is a Google product, and there's going to be lots of other products from like Amazon and the other kind of big cloud platforms where you're going to be able to create your own custom model. So be a mix of an existing model plus all your FAQs, all your content, all your descriptions, etc. Do you think that may be a game changer for brands, and then will give the ability for some sort of self-service for internal teams to be able to use that? I don't know if that discussion has come up already for your clients. And we saw an example of Coca-Cola where they released something to the public, which was make your own Coca-Cola ad with DALL-E. It was a preset defined kind of Coca-Cola images, and it was obviously kind of a limited kind of guardrails up. Is that something that's being discussed at this moment?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if anyone in the room saw, Burger King did some AI created TV ads a couple of years ago, right? So this whole AI as a bit of a fad, getting consumers engaged, I think exists and will continue to exist around that. However, what I think we'll see is that's going to wear off really quickly, because it's just going to become a part of all of our lives. And then where brands are a little bit more open around the content that can and cannot be uploaded. So Samsung the other day announced that they are asking all of their developers to not add any code onto ChatGPT, to not use ChatGPT at all with coded prompts. Part of the reason for that is that you're putting data out into the public domain, and that will cause a problem over time. Mm-hmm. So the ability to create your own, if you've got enough data to train it, is going to be really important. The challenge that pretty much every organisation in the world, apart from the likes of Google and Amazon, have is there simply isn't enough data to train it.
Yeah,
and that will be the challenge.
One of the other challenges is around, and we didn't have time for those slides, but kind of the power, the speed. The speed is pretty good, but it's not quite as quick as a search result, but also the power to consume, to do these calculations. Is that also something that brands might have a consideration? Obviously, that's something that your business as a B Corp is interested in. And if you can say we're using this technology, but it's burning a lot of carbon to be able to do these processes, what's the considerations there?
So we're not a B Corp, but we are on our journey to carbon neutral.
Carbon neutral, that was it, yeah.
Very exciting in itself. Look, it definitely takes energy, but the point is it takes less energy than having someone sat down at a machine doing work that might take 10 times as long.
Yeah.
So I think it will absolutely have an energy consideration, but no more than spinning up a few extra VMs somewhere to try to get to a solution.
Rupa, you saw that video before where it was kind of more kind of custom. Could you see that in the future where you're working on behalf of a big brand and you've got access to that? Do you think that'd be a useful tool for you, but it would still follow all the conversations we've had before today about, it will bring out the correct name of the product and it'll create me an image that is according to their brand like guidelines, but you'll still need to go through those processes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the technology that you showed earlier, I think particularly from an internal comms perspective, would be really valuable. I think having the ability to create those videos quite quickly and then being able to then edit and tailor, I think would be really beneficial actually to companies to be able to communicate internally with their employees, and essentially it makes you more efficient. It gives you the tools at your fingertips. So why would you not want to have a go at least? And even if you don't end up using that content, it's again a starting point to then brief in an agency or to create the film somehow as well.
The tone of voice for Insure and Go, it's got its own kind of tone of voice. Do you think that technology will be able to capture that tone of voice and be able to output it, or is that just something you're just never going to be able to do? And obviously, you've got examples of brands that their tone of voice is even more kind of out there in terms of comedy or style and etc.
I think it's going to be able to get close enough, because even within the company we all have our own particular way of writing. So for example, I did generate a blog that was part AI, part myself, and my colleague, he didn't necessarily clock that it was AI based, but he did clock that it wasn't my usual tone. So he was like, oh, did you use AI, or did someone sort of help with the content on this, etc.? And it was a case of sort of, it still felt like Insure and Go, but it didn't feel like me.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to get us close, but again, that's where you still need the human at the end to add that little pinch of spice, essentially, to even with the custom language builds. It would be beneficial as well to give it access to some of our databases, because especially at AllClear we specialise in medical travel insurance. So quite a lot of our content will write an email about tips for travelling with a heart attack, etc., which is great if you've had a heart attack, less interesting if you haven't. So it would be good to be able to use it to generate, okay, so for Monday's email, we want to send this email to these customers that have got, they've had heart issues, etc., which we can do at the moment, but it would be nice to be able to use this to speed up the process and potentially generate some of the emails as well, so that we don't have to spend quite as long on that, so that everyone's getting more relevant emails directly for themselves, essentially.
And do you see these tools being more useful for agencies, in-house, or is it freelancers, or is it going to be kind of everybody?
I'd say that it's going to be useful for everybody, but there's probably slightly more use that agency and freelance will get out of it, because I already know the Insure and Go and the AllClear tone. I don't need to learn that. I quite often have to brief the bot on it, but I'd imagine if you're working for multiple different companies with wildly different tones, being able to use that to go, right, generate it in the tone of this company specifically, I'd imagine that's going to be hugely advantageous for agencies and freelance.
And Chris, yourself, kind of the usage of these tools, would you envisage in the future you being able to say, right, we're going to do a project where we're going to take all of your brand assets or a brand tone of voice, we're going to help create the model, and then we're just going to give it to an in-house team to use? Do you think that could happen in the future, and that maybe your role as a creative agency might be deciding what those inputs are and creating that training data, or is it not going to work like that, do you think? Because it needs too much data to be able to match that tone of voice and match those brand assets.
I think one of the interesting points around that is that as people become more and more used to using AI, what we may see start to emerge are training sets of data that people can have access to on an open source basis. And then you can supplement that with internal data, which makes it a little easier, a little more accessible for businesses to create their own data sets. In terms of the role of an agency though, what's really interesting is that we see the role of agencies change all the time. We're really fortunate, we've literally just celebrated 50 years as an agency, which is good fun. We had champagne, which is always a good day. And throughout that time, we've got people who've been in the agency kind of 10, 15, 20 years. They've seen the role of a creative agency change substantially. We've got members of the team who were creating ads well before the internet was ever thought of. So if we think about the way that that's evolved from the big creative idea through to creating articulations of that on TV, in online media, through to CRM journeys, through direct mail, through email, what's next? Is it creating prompts for our clients? Is it training our clients on how to run internal teams with AI? Is it helping the business teams, the product teams within businesses use AI to better brief their internal marketing teams? The benefit we have, and I say we as in we, not we as in me, is that we're right at the front of this. You know, marketing as an industry is picking up AI more quickly and more widely than pretty much anyone else. And so we have the benefit of being able to go and explore these pieces with, first in the background, but then with our clients, and take it to legal and compliance, like you mentioned, Rupa, take it to the product teams, take it to product development, take it all across our client businesses. And that might be where the role of a creative agency might be, who knows, in 5-10 years.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yes, Sal.
I work for a charity as well, so we don't really have money for like paid ads. And do you think ChatGPT can kind of give like specific keywords that will kind of get you to that level of getting attention and traction without having to use paid ads?
Oh wow, that's really hard, isn't it? Because in terms of paid for, the social channels that we all work across are kind of stacked against you, aren't they? You know, they want your money at the end of the day. That's how they continue to exist. And so there's only going to be certain amounts that can be done. Can it help you cut through to an extent? Absolutely. Can it help you with test strategies? 100%. And I think what the gentleman to your right said before around generating loads of content, maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's about using AI to help you get further on things like the CRM strategy so that you don't have to think about that. And then you can spend human time really looking at how we're going to get that cut through content in organic.
I think we've also seen with Google, they're releasing more products and tools that are using AI, which actually removes some of the onboarding processes, or we might see something in the future where, you know, it's going to create the ad copy for us, and therefore then it frees up more time to do that. The one thing with that is that's actually going to bring more charities, more advertisers onto the platform, because that's kind of what Amazon and Google and all these different advertisers want. But that's just going to increase the competition, unfortunately. But that's what they're focusing on, how they can get more people spending ads on. And yeah, you can try and squeeze more money out of existing people that are advertising, but if you get the companies that aren't advertising onto the platforms, that's something that we could see happening in the future. Do you have any more questions at this moment?
I have one small one, not
Go on.
sure just your predictions. I'm just interested in, obviously there's a business model for Google, Microsoft, we all get that, paid search, we know that. I'm interested in how people are going to use search in like a year, like Google, is Google dead? Is it going to be like, how's Bard? You know what I mean? Like already people at work and all my friend groups are going to ChatGPT to ask questions. We're already seeing that movement. So are people going to still use Google? You know, what's your predictions on that? Yeah.
I think so, at least for now, because I think people are using it. It's a bit of a novelty at the moment. Once that fades, I mean, Google is synonymous with search. You don't search anything anymore, you Google it. And as much as ChatGPT has its uses, I can't see it usurping Google just yet. And because it's not necessarily got access to the as much information as Google or the same information, I think Google's going to be with us for a little bit while, a little bit longer, but it could be interesting.
Some of the content that you will be writing has obviously got different purposes, but one of the main purposes will be to rank for answers in search results, or to provide the answers for featured snippets or for voice results. What do you think that could happen there on that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be a shift, and things are changing all the time. So who knows? Maybe we will be looking at ChatGPT first rather than Google in the future. But I'm in agreement with Russell. I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing. Definitely. I also think the authenticity and the content that's that comes out of it isn't necessarily accurate. And I think, given everything that's happening in the world, fake news and all the rest of it, I think you have to take everything you read with a pinch of salt, unfortunately. And I know that, when you Google, you don't necessarily always get the accurate results, but I feel more comfortable with what I find on Google than probably what I find on ChatGPT. So I think it's just another step that you're going to have to maybe, do, authenticate the results and so on. But yeah, I don't see it kind of taking over just yet.
Chris, any views?
I love this question so much. It's such an amazing question because clearly none of us know. But can I ask, has anyone got maybe a member of the family, maybe they're 18 or 19, they're at uni and they're talking to their friends? Does anyone? Yeah, or they know someone. Cool, fab. What do they talk to their friends on? Snapchat or TikTok, Discord, fantastic. So we do loads of work with the local universities, and I was speaking to loads of young adults about the way they talk with their friends, and I promise this is going back to AI, bear with me. Like they use Facebook Messenger to speak to their family, really close family, WhatsApp to speak with slightly extended family. They talk to their friends on Snapchat, they DM the person who they think they really like on Instagram, and then they talk with their friend groups on Discord. And across so many of the teams that I work with, across so many of the client teams that I work with, they don't know what Discord is. And that's cool, it's a generational shift. And exactly that same generational shift is what we're going to see over the course of the next little while. Another question, has anyone seen the TikTok ad, where the TikTok TV ad that they ran at the end of last year, beginning of this year, where it's a dad doing up his flat? Did anyone see that? Yeah? Fantastic, a few nods around the room. Telling you to search on TikTok. Search on TikTok for what you want to do. And again, this is a shift. Gen Z are already using TikTok as a search platform. They're already searching for tips, tricks, financial advice. Oh my word. FinTok as a hashtag on TikTok has reached over 1 billion views, which is just phenomenal, really, for a platform that didn't exist 5 years ago. Generational shift. So much so that TikTok are telling us, as millennials, use us to search. Don't use Google to search anymore, use us to search when you want this kind of content. And I really like absorbing TikTok content. It's my favourite kind of content to absorb. Sorry to the copywriters. So because of that, we're seeing a change in the way that some people search, a migration of the way that other people search, and this, for the first time in years, a kind of opening up of this, how am I going to find content? Am I going to Google it? Am I going to use Yahoo? No, I'm not going to use Yahoo. But I might use TikTok. I might use ChatGPT to find out how to write an Excel formula. I will never Google an Excel formula again in my life. Yeah. So I think, and perhaps the inference was, I think we will be changing the way we search. In your question, I would be very surprised if we don't. And Google will still be the go-to for some questions, without a doubt.
I thought you would say old people.
Not would I? Goodness. But I suspect more is going to change than we can imagine at the moment.
I'd also add, it's going to be interesting to see how Bard integrates with Google to make, because that might be the perfect hybrid for AI searching. If it's got access to all Google searching, then it's got potential to be huge.
Yeah.
Just going to watch the ChatGPT TED Talk last night actually, And I think you brought it up at the beginning with the whole plugin idea. Now, you talked about the generational shift, and Bard integrating is a good point. Do you think we'll see an end of the generational shifts of different platforms for different age groups and actually have AI integrated into each of those to bring them together to enhance them, or do you think they will stay separate to each three of you?
I think that the AI will exist within every tool that we use today, but then in 2 years' time there's going to be a new platform that none of us can imagine at the moment, which uses AI in a different way, which will become the mainstay. Again, TikTok didn't exist 5-10 years ago, and if we were sat here before going, do you know what? There's not going to be a case where kids don't use Instagram anymore. I think we would have all laughed. I don't think we would have thought that was real. So yes, I think it's both. It's a yes to both parts of your question.
I think that's about what we've got all time for. First of all, can we have a round of applause for our panellists? Once again, I'd like to thank CHS for recording. We'll be sending copies of the presentations over to you and then some of the videos later.